Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So today's seminar, as it may well be, we've dedicated to the fiqh of Zakat. I'm going to, inshallah, be with you for about an hour. And the intention is that the core concepts of Zakat are taught to you such that the list of questions that I've received, I hope that you will answer for me, inshallah ta'ala, or with me. Can I have a show of hands of how many people have actually studied or acquainted with the fiqh of Zakat? Don't be humble about it. So Maulana, he teaches, he doesn't need to pick his hand up. Where's Asim gone? Maulana Asim. Okay. So how many people are acquainted with the fiqh of Zakat? Okay, I think Zakah is not too difficult to explain. And I hope, inshallah, by the end of this 1 hour, you'll have a good understanding of the rules of Zakah, at least the core points. And I've got a list of questions that, inshallah, we'll see if we can go through them together. Okay? What I do need from you is attention. It's important. I don't mind questions, but usually from experience what you find is the student asks a question that is soon to be answered. Okay, so just go with me, and inshallah, hopefully by the end of this 1 hour, I won't say that you become an expert, but you definitely be better off than where you started, inshallah ta'ala. Zakah, as you know, is the third pillar of Islam. Islam is built on 5 pillars, the third of it being zakah. And it's a beautiful concept that we have in our religion. When you look at worships of different types, there's that worship that you do with the limbs, there's a worship that you do with your wealth, there's a worship that you do by restraining, and you do a worship which includes everything. So salah is a worship we just performed and offered, which is merely to do with the limbs. And saum is restraining. You abstain, rather, not restrain, abstain from a few items. From morning to evening. Hajj is a combination of everything. And zakah is solely related to your wealth. So it's an act of worship. It's important that when we talk about this pillar, we recognize first and foremost that it's an act of worship, obedience to Allah, before we start thinking and talking about how it may benefit the community. For sure, zakah helps people and transfers some wealth from the most wealthy, affluent, fortunate of the community to those who are somewhat less fortunate. I think some discussions of zakah people are well familiar with, but I'll take nothing for granted and let's get started. So zakah in a nutshell is there's a certain type of people who are going to give a certain amount of their wealth to a certain type of people. That's zakah. So a certain type of people are going to give a certain amount of their wealth to a certain type of people. So we're going to go through all 3 aspects of zakah, but the predominant discussion will be in the first aspect as to who is eligible to pay, who actually has to pay, who are these first certain type of people that need to pay zakah. Okay. So zakah needs to be paid by anyone who we in the Sharia consider to be wealthy. Who we consider to be wealthy. Who is wealthy? And in order for a person to be wealthy, who is going to pay the zakah, there are 5 conditions. The first of them is that he must be a Muslim. Okay? Who does that exclude? Non-Muslims, good. Secondly, he must not be a slave. We don't have many anywhere now. But who does that exclude? Who does it exclude? Slaves. Okay. He must be an adult. Who does that exclude? Minors, children. So, before continuing, is there going to be zakah on the wealth of children? No. Have you just found a loophole? I hope not. Inshallah ta'ala. Okay? We'll talk about that as well, inshallah. That's in our school. In the Shafi'i school, zakah is wajib on the wealth of children. In our school, zakah is wajib on an adult and not on minors. So by default, not wajib on their wealth either. We'll address that a bit later. Zakah, fourth condition for a wealthy person, he must have sanity. So who does that exclude? Yes, insane people. Right? Those who are not of sound mind. So their wealth is also not subject to zakah. And then finally, and this is where it gets tricky, is that this wealthy person must possess a certain amount of wealth. And this certain amount we call nisab. We call nisab. Or in English, he must possess a threshold of wealth. He must possess a threshold of wealth. We call this nisab. So this is who we call a wealthy person. A wealthy person must be a Muslim, so there's no zakah on non-Muslims. A wealthy person must not be a slave. A wealthy person, who we call a ghani, is someone who is an adult, so not a minor, who is sane, so not insane, and he possesses the threshold. So far, so good? Yep, okay. So now the second question, and that's the key question, what is the nisab? What is the threshold? So there are two types of threshold. Threshold is going to be a sum of money. Okay? The first type of threshold is the threshold that makes zakah obligatory upon you to pay. So if you have this much money, with all its conditions, you have to pay zakah. So zakah becomes payable on you. That makes sense? Yep. And there's a second type of threshold, which is a threshold that prevents you being a recipient of zakah. That prevents you taking zakah. Okay? The threshold is the same. The threshold is the same. Whether it be the threshold that makes zakah obligatory upon you, the nisab that makes zakah obligatory upon you, or the nisab that prevents you taking zakah, is the same amount, but it's worked out differently. It's worked out differently. The zakah that makes zakah obligatory upon you, the nisab that makes zakah obligatory upon you, only takes into consideration certain types of wealth, and the zakah that prevents you taking zakah, the nisab that prevents you taking zakah, includes all your wealth. So it includes a different type of wealth, if I may say. The second type of threshold we'll discuss at the end, inshallah. But we're going to now discuss the threshold that if you have this sum of money, you have to pay zakah. Does that make sense? Okay. So before continuing, if we look at Muslims in relationship to zakah, they fall into three categories. The first category I'll help you with, and you tell me the second and the third. The first category of people are the people who are going to pay zakah. That good? First type of Muslims, you're going to pay zakah. What's the second category? Say again? They don't have to pay zakah. Okay. And the third type? Who receive it. Good. So the second type, they're not going to receive it. So the first type who pay, second type who receive, and the third type of people are those who don't pay but are not eligible to receive either. Does that make sense? So people fall into three categories. Either zakah is obligatory upon you, you must pay, or you are a recipient of zakah with its conditions, or you fall in between. That you don't have the threshold that makes you pay, but you also have enough so that you can't take. Most people probably fall into that category. Maybe, I don't know. Is that okay so far? So let's move on now to the discussion of how do we work out what the threshold is. How do we say that you possess a threshold? We call this in Arabic, sahibun nisab, a person who has the threshold, who's met the limit. In order for you to be sahibun nisab, there are 5 conditions. This is where it gets a bit complicated, but not too difficult. So stay with me. The first one is, in order for us to consider you to be sahib al-nisab, i.e. you have the threshold, a year has to pass over your wealth. A year has to pass over your wealth. This year is the lunar year and not the solar year. So we're going to work on the Islamic months and not on the Gregorian calendar. That makes sense? There's no time when the year starts for you. The year will start individually. Different for every person. Similar to like your birthdays, right? Everyone's not born on the 1st of Jan, unless you're coming over to UK from Pakistan. You may not know that, by the way, but it's easy. Names change and so do dates of birth. Anyway, so can we cut that? Okay. So the first condition for zakah to be that you've become payable, you have to pay, is a year has to pass. Okay. When does the year start? The year starts from when you've earned or you have in your ownership, not earned necessarily, you have in your ownership the threshold, the amount. Once you have the amount, let's for argument's sake for now, say it's £1,000. So let's say you're 16 years old, you've got nothing. Right? Mom, dad been paying everything for you. You, 17, start a job. You start saving. By the time you get to 18, you've got £1,000 in your account. Your year starts there. That makes sense? Now we count from here to the following year. And if 1 year later, same date, Islamic calendar, you take a snapshot of your account, and if your account shows plus 1,000, you pay zakah on that sum. That good? Right. So if you started, let's say, on the 1st of Ramadan, that's when you had £1,000 in your account. 1,000 is not the threshold, using that as an example for now. So if you had £1,000 in your account, 1st of Ramadan, next year, 1st of Ramadan, just look at your account. We're only looking at money at the moment. And if you've got £5,000, you're paying zakah on £5,000. Snapshot. That good? Okay, now 3 things may happen in this time. Now 1 year. First thing, which is what happens to most people, money just goes up. Right? You just earn. So year 1, or the beginning of Ramadan last year, you had 1,000. 1 year later, you've got 25,000. Okay, mashallah ta'ala. Halal, inshallah ta'ala. You pay zakah on 25,000. Irrelevant of where the last 20,000 may have come in. So let's, for argument's sake, you said you had £1,000 and you had 1,500 for the whole year. 2 days before Ramadan, your father gave you a gift of £5,000. That 5,000, we don't need that to go through a whole year because that is cash, money. Money, the year started on money. You just add it to the year that's running. So fluctuations, whether it's up or down, are given no consideration. Fluctuations, up or down, are given no consideration. If they're above the threshold, no consideration when that money came in. If they go beneath the threshold, so they dip beneath the threshold, they go under 1,000, but they come back up by the 1st of Ramadan following year, plus 1,000, you're still paying zakah on that sum. Even if you were under 1,000 for the 11 months. That makes sense? So 1st Ramadan last year, you got £1,000. We say, okay, you are sahib al-nisab with the other conditions that have been met on that one point. Your year started, immediately you bought a mobile phone, which cost you 100, you're on 900. And you stayed on 900, which is beneath the threshold for now, as an example, all the way to 2 days before Ramadan. 2 days before Ramadan, you earned some money and you've gone to 1,010. By the end of the year, when you looked at your account, you were over 1,000. Snapshot, you paying zakah on £1,010. So fluctuations up or down are given no consideration as long as you are above the threshold at the end of the year. If, however, you go to 0 at any time during the year, that year comes to an end. Okay, so you first of Ramadan, you had 1,000. 1 month later, you spent all that 1,000, you on zero. So what month is we in now? If first Ramadan, 1 month later? No, next month. What's the next Islamic month? Shawwal, mashallah, good. So Shawwal, you on zero. That means your year came to an end. So what's the month after Shawwal? Dhul Qa'dah. Dhul Qa'dah, you now get 1,000. So your year now starts from Dhul Qa'dah to Dhul Qa'dah. That makes sense? Come Rabi'a, the following year, you spend all your money. You've gone minus 200. The year comes to an end, even if it's been going on for 4 months. Come Rajab, you've earned 1,000, your year starts again. Now Rajab to Rajab. Does that make sense? So you may go on for 5 years and you never had one complete year where you did not go beneath zero. So if you go beneath zero, your year comes to an end. Whether it goes down physically, that there's no money left in your account, or even if you've got 1,000 in your account but you've incurred a debt of 2,000. Technically, you're minus 1,000. Does that make sense? Okay, so the first thing for zakah, for you to be sahib and nisab, 1 year, complete year, must pass over your wealth with the condition that your wealth does not become zero, because there needs to be money for a year to pass. That makes sense? Any questions there? Related to the year. Good, let's carry on. Second is, which type of wealth are we looking at? Which type of wealth are we going to take into consideration when we're talking about whether you have to pay zakat? There's only a few. The first is money. So money, whether it be in pounds, dollars, rupees, cash in any currency, whether it be in your bank account, under your pillow, wherever it may be, if you have ownership of money, zakah will be on that money. Whether that money is in, there's some exclusions which are not going to be discussed here unless somebody brings up a question. But otherwise, if that money is in your friend's hand because you've extended a loan, right? Zakah is still obligatory, but maybe not the payment distinguishment I'm going to come to. Or that money happens to be in an institution that you can't take out, like, give me an example where you put some money, but you can't take it out. A bond for a certain amount of time, a pension scheme, those kind of things. So money is money, and zakah is going to be on money. There's only one major difference between zakah being obligatory and zakah, its payment being obligatory now. Okay, so although I'm going to continue on discussing some issues, but just on this one point, if I was to extend to you £10,000 for 10 years, that money is not in my hand. It's in my ownership, but not in my possession. That good? The money that I've given to you is my money, but it's not in my possession. It's in your possession. So at the end of the year, I'm not eligible to pay zakah today. At the end of the year, I will pay zakah when I get my money back. So let's say 10 years later, I receive my 10K back in total. I'm going to pay, when I receive 10K, I'm going to pay 10 years zakah. Does that make sense? Yeah, because it's 10 years I've gone over it. The Sharia did not oblige me to pay immediately because it's not in my possession. But once it comes, you have to backdate. So as a simple rule, a simple procedure, just pay annually whether the money is in your possession or not. You won't have to backdate anything later. Does that make sense? Good. So zakah is obligatory on money in whatever form it's going to be in. 1. Gold in whatever form, jewelry, biscuits, some other form of gold. cookery, coins, cutlery, if it's real gold, right? There's zakah on it, whatever form it may be in. Silver, likewise. That's really the three things most people would have. Next, merchandise. Merchandise is defined as what we call trading stock. Anything you purchased with the intention of resale. Anything you purchased for the intention of resale, there is zakah on the total amount of the item. Give me an example of someone who buys something to sell. Shopkeeper. He goes to the warehouse. He's going to buy a tub of beans. He's going to come and put it on his shelf. Is he buying that to eat or is he buying that to sell to you? He's buying to sell to you. So he bought the beans, he bought the milk for the intention of resale. At the end of his year, he has to pay on the stock that is in his shop, excluding any debts that he may have. Does that make sense? So if I'm a car dealer and I've got 50 cars, and each one I've bought and I've put it on the land, my intention, and it's got for sale sign, clearly I've bought it with the intention of resale. At the end of my year, I'm going to pay on the value of each car, excluding the debt. So it may well be that I've got a car on there, but I actually don't own more than 5% of it. Could be, because I may be a dealer and I'm taking your car and your car and your car and your car, and I've put it there with the intention of selling. And when I do sell, I'll make some money on it from you. Okay, so that's not what our concern is. Our concern is if there is merchandise, if there is trading stock, anything that's been purchased with the intention of resale, there is zakah at the end of the year on its value, the market value. Is that good? Right. Can you guys see that shares will fall into the same category? Anything is an investment. Investment, it's not that you have to sell it today, you sell it 5 years' time, but when you bought it as an investment. Investment is something that you purchase with the intention of resale at its right time. So it's going to be zakah on your shares. Does that make sense? Yep. So what if now I've bought my car, I've driven it for 5 years, and now I put it on for sale. And a year's passed on that car and it's not been sold. Okay, at the end of the year, am I going to pay zakah on that car? No, why not? No. I didn't have intention to sell it when I bought it. That makes sense? So if I put everything in my house for sale, which I've been using, there's no zakah on any of those things. Even though a year's gone back and a for sale sign's on there, simply because they were not bought with the intention of resale. So merchandise is very particular. Trading stock are those items you purchase with the intention of resale. Is that good? Okay, third one, which we've already covered. Zakah is only obligatory in payment on that wealth which you have possession over. So if I've extended a loan to you, I don't have to pay this year. Okay? But ideally, you do pay as you go along, so there's no backdating for you to do. Is that okay? Likewise, pension schemes. But pension schemes are a bit different. Why? Because you may never actually take out the full amount. Right? So if I give you £10,000 today, and I said you can keep it for 5 years, at the end of 5 years, you give me 10K back, I'm going to pay zakah, 2.5%, on the 10K for 5 times. We good? But in a pension scheme, you may never take it all back. So when you've given out money, and now you don't have access to it, and when you do get access, you're going to pay for all the years that you've not had that money, which is above the threshold, when you receive 1/5. So for example, if I've given you 10,000, and after the first year you give me 2,000 back, I'm going to pay 2.5% on 2,000 for 1 year. Second year you give me 2,000 back, I'm going to pay 2.5% on 2,000 for 2 years. Because that was there with you for 2 years. When the third year you give me 2,000 more back, I'm going to pay 2.5% for 3 years, because that 2,000 was with you for 3 years. That makes sense? So you got a pension scheme, and if I've now, at the end, my pension scheme is worth 100K, for argument's sake, and at the end of my pension scheme, they give me an opportunity to take out 25%, which is more than a fifth, and that pension scheme's been there for 25 years, so I got 25K. How much zakah am I going to pay on that? Not the figure, how are we going to calculate it? Can someone answer? Come on, Isam. It can't be that difficult. You're going to pay on the 25K for the number of years that it was not in your possession. How many years was it not in your possession? 25. So you're going to pay 2.5% in the first year, 2.5% second year, third year. Right. Just a slight thing. Leave that aside. Just give 2.5% on 1K. Otherwise, really mathematically, it's 2.5% on 1K for the first year, 2.5% on 1K minus 2.5% for the second year, and such. Right? But don't worry about it, just give a bit extra. Fourth condition is you have to be free from your essential needs, your essentials. Right? So give me an example of essential needs. Things that you can't really live without. They change, by the way, from place to place, time to time. So easy one is shelter. We good? Everyone needs shelter. So if I've got a house I live on in rent, for example, the rent is something deductible, for example. Or if I'm living in my own home, there's no zakah on that property, right? Because I'm living in that house. Even if I'm not living in that house, if I've got 5 houses, right? I live in one, I can't live in 5. Is there zakah in the house that I live in? No. Now I've put the other 4 on rent. Is there zakah on the value of the property for the next 4 properties? No. Because I didn't buy them as an investment to sell. As an investment to keep, that's fine. That's not resell. That good? So I'm not going to pay zakah on my second, third, fourth, or fifth property, but what I will pay zakah on is the income, the rent that I receive, which you may end up spending and whatever it may be. Okay, but you're not going to pay zakah on the value of the property because you did not intend to resell it when you purchased it. Usually that's what people do. They'll make an investment for a rental income. But there's a difference. From these 5 properties, only one is your essential need. The other 4 are not. We're good? Unless you live in a society whereby the summer's too warm and the winter's too cold, and you need to have 2 homes for on the top of the mountain and the bottom of the mountain for different parts of the year, summer at the top and winter at the bottom, summer at the bottom and winter at the top, so that you can survive. So now essential need becomes 2 homes. But we're not living in that society. Is that okay? So there's a reason why I'm saying this. That what's the difference then if there's no zakah on all 5? One is essential, the other 4 are not. What's the difference? The difference will come when we talk about can you receive zakah? Then that discussion will come up there. Because those 4 houses will be taken into consideration to stop you, prevent you from being a recipient of zakah. Okay, so 5 essential needs: shelter, food. Do we agree on food? Yep. Okay. Anything else? Clothing. Essentials. What do you think essentials may be? How many pairs of clothes? Essentially 2, maybe for the winter, 3, right? This doesn't mean that there's zakah on your 10 suits. Right? There is no zakah on any other type of wealth other than what I'm listing. Well, have I listed them all? I've actually forgot to finish them off. Gold, silver money, it's 1. Trading stock, 2. Livestock, animals, which most of us probably don't have. Crops that are irrigated, either by rainwater or by your own water, harvest. And then some, what you call them? Mine stones? Not precious stones, no zakah on precious stones. Things like gas that you might find in your land or something. Oil, whatnot. Yeah, natural kind of wealth that grows in value. But again, most people are excluded from that. So really it's gold, silver, money, and then trading stocks some of you may have, livestock, few of you, harvesting crops, less. That's the only type of wealth you have to take into consideration to see whether you have to pay zakah. So everything else, your 10 phones, your 10 cars, your 10 houses, none of that is zakatable. Good? But there's a difference between essential need and luxury. So let's say 3 pairs of cloth are essentials and 20 are luxury, for argument's sake. But no zakah on any. Is that okay? Mobile phones is perhaps considered to be an essential, perhaps, even though it's best for us to avoid mobile phones because it's got its own harms. Internet, perhaps, especially, and depends also your working life. So if you're a mechanic, tools. If you're a builder, your tools. Doctors have their tools. Teachers need books. Scholars need books. Scholars are allowed to have a second copy of each book just to confirm that the 2 manuscripts or 2 texts are, they're correct and it's not a mistake. Those kind of things. So, taxi driver needs a taxi. That's his essential need for work. That okay? So essential needs change. Fridge in our time, perhaps. Microwave's not good for you. I don't have a microwave. But somebody argues for argument's sake, I wouldn't argue. A sofa, perhaps. Maybe, may not be. Right? Irrelevant. There's no zakah on these items if they're essentials. Is that okay? And then finally, you have to be free from debt. So for you to be someone who has nisab, these 5 conditions have to be met. The first one, a year has to pass over your wealth. The second one, the types of wealth, the gold, silver, money, livestock, merchandise, crops. Third one, that the money must be in your possession. You have access to it. Fourth one, we're excluding essentials. And then fifth, you have to be free from debt. So debt is, I've taken £1,000 off you, I'm in debt. So I can calculate, when I calculate my zakah, I will deduct my debt of £1,000. Is that okay? Now debts vary. Some debts, what we call strong debts, some are weak debts. Strong debts mean somebody can come and knock your door and say, please give me my money. If I give you 10,000 for 10 years, I'm not obliged to wait 10 years. I can come and knock your door 2 days later and say, look, unfortunately, I need my money back. Shar'an, I can take my money back, and you have to give my money back. Of course, you wouldn't have to make some means to raise that 10K, take it off somebody else to give it to me. Okay, so a strong debt is there's someone knocking the door at any time. That's a strong debt. So any money you take from a person is a strong debt. But they're weak debts. Weak debts is no one asking. There's no one asking. Like, if you marry a lady and the dowry you place is 20K and it's deferred, which means you didn't pay when you got married. It's deferred, which means you're going to pay either it is a divorce, or if you die, 20K from your wealth will be paid to her as your debt to her. She is never going to ask you. And even if she does, you're not obliged to pay because she deferred it. So that's a weak debt. That makes sense? So that debt will not be deducted. So I can't say, oh, I've got 20K mahr to pay, I'm going to deduct that from my year's savings because it's a weak debt. That makes sense? Yep. Okay. So we have some debts that we've incurred, like a mortgage, 100K, 200K. So principally, it's a debt you owe the bank, but it's a weak debt because they only ask you for monthly payments. They don't come and knock your door asking for the annual payment or even the total sum. You have a contract. Leaving aside mortgages are allowed or not. So the reality there is mortgage is a weak debt. The only thing that's a strong debt in a mortgage is that monthly payment, which would be the same if you're paying rent. Right? You've got £500, £600 rent to pay per month that you can deduct from your savings at the end of the year. So the immediate essentials. So when I come to the end of the year, I can take out the amount of food, money for the bills, money for the rent, money for car insurance, money for petrol, money. So whatever essentials you need, that can be deducted from your savings at the end of the year. So from your mortgage, 1 month payment can be deducted. That's what's strong. The rest is all weak. That makes sense? Yeah. What about student loans? What do you think? Student loans. Weak debt. If anyone's taking a student loan, you know very well, they don't take nothing off you. You have to earn a certain amount of money for them to take a certain amount. So if you're earning that much, how much ever they're taking from you, whatever that small amount may be, that much you can deduct from your debt. You can't say, I've got 25k debt, student loan, I'm going to deduct it from my savings. Does that register? Okay, good. So that's if you now have money from either gold, silver, money, gold, you have wealth from money, gold, silver, trading stock, livestock, crops, a year's gone over it, it's in your possession, and you've deducted all your essentials and all your debt, and you're still above the threshold, you've got to pay 2.5%. Practically, that's zakat done. Okay, so what is the threshold, which is probably the question you're asking? The threshold is different for gold and different for silver. So money wasn't really... gold and silver is what was money in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So he said if you have 20 mithqal of gold, 20 mithqal, you pay zakah. Or if you have 200 dirhams, silver coins, you pay zakah. 20 mithqal today is approximately 87.5 grams of gold. 87.5 grams of gold. If you have that much gold, you're paying zakah 2.5% on it. 87.5 grams. Silver, the threshold for silver, so if you have silver, is if you have 612 point something grams of gold. So let's say 612, just for the sake of security. 612 grams of gold. If you have that much of silver, if you have that much silver, you're paying zakah 2.5% on it. Does that make sense so far? That's gold and silver done. Now we come to money. How much money do I need to have in order to pay zakah on it? Well, money will either be judged according to the threshold of gold or the threshold of silver. Today, when I say today, I mean not necessarily today, but in this year, gold is far more expensive than silver. There's a big disparity between the two. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, 20 mithqal and 200 dirhams were equal amount in value. But now there's a big disparity. So 87 grams of gold today would be something like 2.5k. But you need to go check it from the jewelers, check the market value, whatever it says. About 2.5k. Silver, 600 grams of silver, 612, is about £250. Is that okay? Now, this disparity started a long time ago. So the scholars all said, Hanafi ulama were quite clear in saying that the threshold for you to pay zakah is silver because it's lower. That means more people are going to pay and more poor people are going to benefit. That makes sense? So if we make the threshold silver, more people are going to pay. But now because silver's come really low, that if somebody at the end of the year has savings of 250 quid, it's not much, right? So now ulama have suggested that let's make the threshold gold for money. That means you need to have 2.5k in saving for you to pay 2.5% on it. So some scholars stick to the old mas'ala and say silver, and that's fair. And some ulama from the Hanafis suggest gold, looking at the circumstances of people. If you're on the, literally on the threshold, if it's 250 and you got 251 pounds, you're not probably in a good state. Perhaps if you take the gold threshold, you won't pay zakah. And if you're like 1,000, 1,500 at the end of the year, even though you haven't reached the gold, perhaps if you take the silver, which is the position of the fuqaha, you pay zakah, the poor people will benefit. So both thresholds are used in our age. Some ulama will say silver, as the previous ulama said, because the lower the threshold, more people pay, the more the poor people benefit. Some today say, well, silver's too low, we'll take the gold threshold for money, that means 2.5k or something like that. That means if you have less than that, you're not paying any zakah. Does that make sense? So this 2.5K or 250 is excluding your debts, excluding your essentials, only taking into calculation money, gold, silver, and the other things I mentioned. And it has to be in your possession as well. Good? Okay. There are two conditions for zakah. One is you must make intention, of course, which you will make. Right? You make an intention to pay. And two, that the one who you're paying to must take ownership. There must be someone who could take ownership of the money. That makes sense? So you can't give zakah to welfare projects, like building a mosque, building a hospital, building a well, fixing a road, building a bridge, and so forth. Or even paying for the funeral costs of the deceased, because the deceased can't take ownership. So zakah is to be paid to living people who take ownership of that money. You can't give zakah to a project. Not even a TV channel, for example. For the running cost of a TV, not allowed. Of course, you have ulama who say it's allowed. Inshallah, that's Allah knows best. Does that make sense? That has to be ownership. Two conditions: intention to pay and ownership. There must be an owner. That's the beauty of zakah. Otherwise, most people would prefer to give to buildings, brick, than to give to people. But the deen of Allah makes you give to the poor, to relieve them from their needs. And one shouldn't go around loopholes to try to find a different way to give to other welfare work. For other welfare work, give your sadaqah, give your halal income to any other good work that you may consider to be good. But zakah has to go into the ownership of people. Okay. Finally, so that we've covered who's got to pay zakah. We've covered how much to pay, 2.5%. That's 1/40 of your savings. And the conditions have been mentioned. And now, who's eligible? So anybody who's poor. Now, who is poor? A poor person is anyone whose total wealth, that includes the second, third, fourth house, the third, fourth, fifth suit, the second, third, fourth mobile phone, i.e. excluding essentials. All of his wealth, excluding essentials, does not add up to the threshold amount. So if, for example, let's say we take gold to be the threshold, and I have £1,500 at the end of the year in my savings, the threshold is 2.5K, am I paying zakah? No. Are you with me? Okay. But now I want to ask, can I take zakah? So you'll say to me, excluding your essentials, what else do you have that's yours? I say, well, I have 3 other pairs of clothes, and I have 3 shoes, and I have 2 mobiles, and I have a sofa set, I have 2 sofa sets, you mention all your property. Other than the essentials, all of that will be calculated to see, does the value of all of that reach 2.5K? If it reaches 2.5K, you're not eligible. That's the threshold I was speaking about earlier, the threshold that stops you, prevents you from becoming a recipient. For that threshold, the money is the same, the amount is same, 2.5K or £250, whatever we use, but it's calculated differently. The wealth that you use for that is all your wealth, excluding the essentials. That makes sense? So your second house, there's no zakah on it, but your second house will prevent you taking zakah. So is there zakah on land? You know that land you've got in Pakistan? Is there zakah on that land? You need to say, well, it's not gold, it's not silver, it's not money, it's not livestock, it's not merchandise, it's not crops. No. But then you will say, but yes, there's zakah on the crops if I sow the land, if there's agriculture. Right? You're paying on the crops and not on the land itself. Okay, but now you want to take zakah. You want to take zakah. There's a lady in Pakistan, she's a widow, she's poor, she doesn't have much money. All she has is a gold and she has land. Can she take zakah? Well, we're going to see gold is not essential and land is not essential need. So her gold is worth more than 2.5K. Her land is worth, everything's worth more than 2.5K. You can't give zakah to her. You can give her sadaqah, you can help her, she's your family, continue. It doesn't have to be that the help only comes to zakah. If she's your family and she's a loved one, or she's in your community, then inshallah help. It shouldn't be that just because she's not eligible for zakah, that you stop helping. And at the same time, zakah is the haqq of the poor. You can't give it to someone who doesn't deserve it. And if you do give it to someone who doesn't deserve it, your zakah is not paid. Unless you had what we call ghalabatul dhann, you had good reason to think, yeah, this is a poor person. So if I'm working in Pakistan and a poor man comes, tattered clothes, and says, for Allah's sake, give me money, and I say to him, I don't have to say to him, I can look at his state and say, this guy is poor, I'll give you zakah. Or he says, yeah, I can take zakah. Even if he's got a mansion where he lives and he's got millions stored up, my zakah is valid. Because I went by what reasonably I would think is a poor man. Even if I found him out to be a thief or whatever else he may be. We're not expected to go and check their bank balances and follow them home and see how they're eating for 5 days. Someone says to you, and you can see, if someone's driving a nice car and says, I need zakah, that's your fault now. That makes sense? So if you've given money to someone thinking that they actually are poor, but they've come out to be not poor, your zakah is paid. But that's only if you've done your due diligence. So if that lady who's a widow is saying, I'm not against widows, of course, you understand that. We want to support them. But that's usually what happens. That's why I'm bringing this up. There's a lady who's a widow in your community and your family's been giving zakah to her for the last 20 years. She may be not eligible. So you can't give zakah to her on the pretense your mum and dad and everyone's been giving it. You need to do your due diligence, find out, does she have wealth? If she has, give her sadaqah. Support her, but not through zakah. Does that make sense? If you understand poor, everyone other than that, you don't have to worry about. Okay? There's a few more, very needy, those that collect zakah. Charities use that as a means of getting people in to take some money from zakah. We leave that discussion aside. That brings us to 10 o'clock. I think if you understood that, you know zakah very well. So what I'll do now is read through some of the questions that I've got. For the next 15 minutes, I'd like you to answer. Be brave. And inshallah, if I know the answer, I'll correct it. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Okay, first one. What's the amount of nisab in today's currency? After I've been explaining for how long? You should say there are 2 nisabs. Are you asking about gold or silver? That's what you should say back, right? So what's the nisab for gold? 2.5K, approximately. But you have to check it. Check what 1 gram is today and multiply by 87. And what's the threshold for silver? 250. Which one do we have to take? Depends. Yeah. The ulama of the past said silver because more people pay. Some of the ulama today are saying take gold because 250 is far too little. You're on the edge yourself anyway. So ulama have given fatwa on both ways. Is there a relief on the amount of zakah you pay for possession of gold even if you own more than what the nisab is? Is there a relief on the amount of zakah you pay for possession of gold even if you own? Right, so the question I'm assuming saying is that if there's zakah on 87 grams of gold and I have 100, does that mean I'm not going to pay the 87 and just pay on 13? Or am I going to pay the total amount of gold? Total. So you have tax reliefs. We don't have that here. Either you're paying, you're not paying or you're paying on the total amount. Good. Does a person who has student loan have to pay zakah? No. How much does he have to pay, if any? Not nothing. Just the fixed amount? No, this is student loan. So I've got 25K student loan. Am I going to deduct 25K from my savings? Yeah, I see what you're saying, on the hard. That means if I'm earning 25K, for argument's sake, and the student loan is taking from me £200 a year, that's what I'm paying on. And not on the 25K, I can deduct £200. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you don't take the, okay. I have a question. Does it need to be given all at once or can be spread throughout the year? What do you think? Throughout the year? Like you're doing tax returns? Yeah? No, this is the haqq of the poor. Once it becomes obligatory, it must be paid.
Or maybe the question relates to making provision to pay throughout the year.
for before the zakah becomes obligatory. So for next year zakah, I want to start paying now. The ulama have differed, but majority said yes, it's allowed. I saved some money for my children in a separate account. I wanted to know if I need to pay zakah on this. No, why not? Because you believe that wealth is for your child. That's the intention. You're saving it for your child. Now that's a loophole. If I now say when the zakah year comes, the day before the zakah year, my 10 billion, I give it to my child, and the day after I take my 10 back, you've got a heavy weight on the final day. Waliyadu billah. So loopholes are not allowed. But genuinely, if you've got a child saving account, that's fine. Or a mother who's got gold, and she is going to give her gold to her daughters for their weddings. So she's made an intention, the gold is a family gold, she doesn't wear the gold, that gold is for my child, and that for my daughter, and she's 5 years old. There's no zakah for her to pay, because we know that's really what's going to happen. Does that make sense? Yep. Can zakah be given to people who have land that they use as a form of farming, and then share the money from the sale of the crop at the end? Can zakah be given to such people who have land that they use as a form of farming? Not necessarily a no, most likely no. You'll have to ask, how big is that plot of land? If it's only 1 meter by 1 meter, and it's not worth anything, then they may be poor. Then could be, yeah. Right, so the answer is, if the value of that land is more than the threshold amount and all the other wealth I've got, then no, and if not, then yes. Can you give zakah money towards building a masjid? Why not? No ownership, no milkiyah. Good. Now for building, yes. My zakah question is, if I have a certain amount of savings, which is due to surpass a year, but at the same time, you're in the process of purchasing a property, well, the savings will go towards the purchase. So basically, the year's coming to an end, I've just saved £75,000. I'm going to buy a house next month, or I'm going to put it down as a deposit, but my zakah years come to an end. Do I have to pay on the 75k in Ramadan, if that's my year ending? Knowing that 75k is going to go to an essential need after Ramadan? Or is that money excluded? So Ramadan's coming, a few days' time. I've got 9k in my account, for example. I don't have that much, right? I've got 9k in my account, but I'm going to purchase a property. So that's a need. But I'm going to purchase it in Shawwal. Now Ramadan's come, a year's gone over my 9k. Is that 9k excluded? No, because you don't know if you're going to live. You haven't purchased it, exactly. Intention is not enough, you haven't purchased. You have to pay on that 9k and then continue saving to go and put your deposit down. Okay. Who's eligible for zakah? There's 8 types, but the main one I told you. Who can you pay zakah to? Fuqara, masakin. What's a faqir? What's a poor person? Someone whose total wealth, excluding the essentials, does not reach the threshold. Good? I heard you're supposed to give zakah on clothes and dishes. What do you think? No? Okay, but dishes? Depends. If they are gold or not. Good. Okay, I'm currently a student studying away from home. I work over the Christmas summer periods, and I receive loans in order to help for my accommodation. Is there zakah on me? Well, not really, unless he's got a lot of money in his savings. Right? Otherwise, the fact that he's working doesn't make any difference. Okay. Can you tell me if you've paid zakah but found out that for more than one reason, it needs to be repaid, as people you have trusted have not distributed it, so I have to pay them all again? Do you have to intend a year for each zakah again? Okay, so what do you think of that? I want to tell you the question again. The question is, I've given you zakah to distribute.
If you've given us zakah to distribute,
Yeah.
then the zakat hasn't been met.
Yeah. So I've given it to you to go to Pakistan, but you've not distributed it. Do I have to pay again? Right. So, in simple, the person that you trust, when you pay your tax returns, they say categorically you can't blame the accountant. Have you not read that? It says that you cannot come back and say my accountant didn't do my forms because he's under your duress, under your control. It's your responsibility. So if the person I've entrusted to is my brother, for example, and he's gone and not distributed, I'm held accountable because I made him my representative. Right, that's my fault. But if I've given it to a charity who are saying we are distributing zakah, then that's a good enough reason for me to say I've given it to trustworthy people. Then you won't have to repay that zakah. But if it's someone you've chosen, your mate, and they've not distributed, we'd like to think that you are held accountable. Unless the money was stolen. Even then, I think that's no, if it's okay. Okay, do you have to intend zakah each year? Yeah. So can I pay for my wife without telling her? Can I pay for my wife? Yes. But there's a condition. There has to be intention on her part. That makes sense? Because she's doing the ibadah. So she has to intend it. She say, yep, I'm paying zakah, but with your wealth. Okay. The question actually is, can a husband pay for his wife's zakah? If the answer is yes, as long as the lady has intended it, because intention is a condition. Also, if new gold has been purchased, is there zakah on that if it has not been a year? No, but on the condition that there's no previous gold. Remember, new gold is given no consideration like new money. It just adds on to the previous gold. So if there's no gold and you've purchased gold for the first time, then we give you a year. The Sharia gives a year. If you've got a lot of gold already and you purchase new gold, you're adding that on to whatever is existence already. Is there zakah on money that's not in one's possession, like the money you've given to a committee? Committees. Is there zakah on it? Yes. Is payment wajib? No. When's payment wajib? When you receive it. Very good. Can I pay 2020 zakah in 2019? Can I pay next year's zakah today? Some of the ulama said no because it's not farad on you, but many have said it's allowed because you're doing it for a greater good, making it easy for you. And if you die, it goes as sadaqah for you.
How would you know the amount?
You have to guess how much you've got. And then when it comes to the end of the year, if it's less, you have to add a bit more. Okay, we leave that one out. If one is in major debt, would they still have to give zakah? So you have to ask what kind of debt is it? A mortgage is a major debt. So if you've got a mortgage, do you pay zakah? Well, again, so what we're saying is the only amount that can be really excluded is the monthly payment. And then you have to look at the rest of your own savings. Otherwise, can you imagine, right? What's the aim of zakah? Allah says is to take money from the wealthy to give to the poor. So let me now become a millionaire. Let me go and purchase a house for $1 million, take a 900k mortgage on, and say I don't have to pay zakah and live a luxury lifestyle. It's not really exactly the purpose of the Sharia. If one's claiming benefits, would they have to give zakah? What do you think? See, a lot of questions are not yes and no. A lot of the question an answer to most of the questions is depends. Your circumstance. How much you have in your savings.
Depends if it's an essential result.
We always exclude essentials. Yeah. Essentials are always excluded. Then we look at your savings. Is zakah fard upon a woman that has a large amount of gold, wedding gift, that she wants to sell but can't as it's in the possession of a mother or mother-in-law and they don't allow her to sell it? Good question. Okay. So, that kind of wealth, that even if it's under your ownership, but you have no access to, you won't even pay zakah on it when you get it. So, for example, if me and you got a feud, I say, you owe me 10k, you say no, there's not likelihood I'll get it back. We've got a court case going on. 10 years later, I win the case, I don't pay zakah in the past years. Okay? Because there's a dispute on that. So if I've given you gold, my mother-in-law, and she's not willing to give it, and you think you're never going to get it back, because that's how it is, you won't pay zakah on it when you do get it. If it's exactly how the person said it. Okay. How much zakah can be given to one deserving person, maximum? So, you have one fakir, he's poor, and my zakah, I've collected, say, £10,000 from people. Can I give all 10,000 to him? You don't want to make people wealthy. You can, but better not to. In the Shafi'i school, you should distribute it amongst all the 8 categories or 7. Better to give more poor people than to give one poor person too much. And that's the end of the questions. Well done, mashallah. I think you're going back today with some better understanding of zakah, I hope. Any questions from you? Otherwise, we'll ask Sidi Thaqib or some of the munshids to maybe sing some qasaid and or some tea or whatever. Sidi Saud.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. First of all, can you give zakat to an institution that look after the orphans and people like that?
If there's an institute that is particularly for orphans, shelters them, and the institute takes care of all their needs, shelter, food, education, then you can give zakat to that institution, to the person. But that person, the founder of the institution, will have to do what we call a hila, where he'll get the money and give it to the ownership of one of the orphans, and the orphan will then put it back into the institution for it to be shared amongst all the orphans. And that's, of course, assuming that they're orphans and they're poor, that's why they're living there. Because you can be an orphan and be very wealthy. So yes, for an institution that shelters orphans, i.e. fuqara, or an institution that hosts students of Sharia, sacred knowledge, full-time, and it gives them their accommodation and their food and their books and so forth. This is why most madaris in Pakistan, India, and the poor countries house the students and make everything free so that they can be recipients of zakah. You know, you're not going to get much fees from 4 children, so they gave everything free to the children, and then they tried to go and raise some zakah to fund the children's study. One of the 8 people who is permitted to take zakah is in fi sabilillah. And from fi sabilillah, one of the people is the student of knowledge who's studying Sharia full time. Second question?
Second question is, you mentioned earlier, if, for example, a mother has 5k worth of gold, but she has the intention of giving it to the child when she marries, you said there's no zakat, right?
She has to give it, not intention. So if she's said it, or actually given it, that this is my daughter's gold, even if she holds it, there's no zakat on it. Or if she's given it, there's no zakat. But if she's got an intention to give it, that's not enough. She has to transfer the ownership of it.
If she's given it to her child and that child is over 18, for example.
18 is not, baligh is when they become baligh, not 18. Yes. If they become baligh, then they are responsible to pay on that gold. That daughter is responsible to pay on that gold. Yeah.
So when we talked about children earlier, so children starts from the age of baligh, is it?
So child is anyone who's not gone through puberty, adolescence, 12, 13, whatever it may be. Is there another question? Heather, you had a question? Atif? Yeah, the parent. If that be the case, if the parents should pay zakat on that wealth for that child, from his wealth. Yeah, go on.
If you're given a sum of money with a condition attached to it, pay off something, a revenue expenditure in the future, is zakat payable on that?
Say that again.
If you're given a certain amount of wealth
I'm given.
on a condition that you have to pay off something with it in the future for your benefit, do you pay zakat on that?
It doesn't.
A parent gives a child money
Yeah,
for the running of their house for the future, do you
yeah.
pay zakat on that?
But if you're running the house with essentials, so that money is going towards the essentials for the future. So a father, for example, is giving a son who's an adult money in order for them to be able to purchase a property. For example, you got to pay zakat on that. Yeah. Any other questions? Inshallah. Go on, Atif. Is there zakat on haram money? Thaqib? No? In your school or in... No zakah? Asim? Is zakah on haram money? I think there is zakah. You have to give all the... That's the answer. Yeah, haram money, you have to give all of it away. Yeah, of course. Jazakumullah khair. Of course. Haram money has to be all given away. Forget zakah. Barakallah feekum. No, you get sometimes caught up into the That's right. Haram money, give all of it away. Yeah. And if it's taken if you're taking someone's haqq, you have to give it back to them. If it's earned to haram income, give it in the way of Allah. Yes, so that question shouldn't be arise. Yeah. Ed.
Let's say I've got £2,500 at the start of the year and I've reached the threshold, but do I have to calculate for the rest of the year for my essentials if I have to pay rent for the 12 months and I'm not in a job?
No, 1 month. You can take 1 month's rent.
At the end of the month, at the end of the year, you calculate
You can deduct any essentials at the end of the year. Months running. So that's how we live here, monthly. Rent, food, bills, whatever your outgoings are for that month, you can deduct it from the total amount. Sorry? 1:30. Inshallah ta'ala. Inshallah we conclude here. Jazakumullah khair. Hope you've benefited. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.